Us for the second attempt of episode 6 tonight, as a matter of fact. I'm JLo. I'm the host of The Treat Show, and joining me is good old Andrew Hatch from NCRPS, National Cannabis Risk Prevention Services.
Got it in one, Jay.
Gosh, sorry about that. All right. So tonight, I feel like there's been a lot of conversations around perpetual harvest and commercial scale. I think commercial scale and home grows, but I think that's something that I'd like to kind of separate as well, is what commercial scales really, the difference even amongst themselves. And like when we're talking 5,000 square foot to 10,000 to, 2550 or above. And I feel like you're the perfect guy to have this conversation with.
Yay. Nobody called me perfect yet. Well, actually, maybe in this lifetime, but I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Andrew. I know that we've had you on the show here a couple times and the Adam Dunn show, of course. But just so people can kind of understand that you are probably the greatest and a great trusting source to talk about perpetual harvest and pest and disease prevention. We're definitely going to be touching on.
All right. I'm that kind of nerd for sure.
So how long has the perpetual harvest really been something, I think that...
Well, first, really quick, my name's Andrew Hatch, and I'm Director of Product Safety for National Cannabis Risk Prevention Services. I've got about 6 years in the cannabis industry, and I've directed research, in biological and physicochemical R&D around just kind of all the problems of producing at scale, but I really got focused on the microbial aspect a few years back, and so that's kind of where I'm at. I just wanted to preface.
No, that's important. Sorry about that.
What I'm going to say with what I do and have done.
I'm so sorry. This is not working for me. I'm giving up. I think that from working with Native Roots, when you first joined that team, that scale was so massive at the time. Not discounting it now, it still is a very large facility. But is that how many rooms are we talking? What were we talking with? Just so people can get an idea of what facility type we're dealing with.
You're gonna kill me, but we're gonna have to edit out that because Native has not given me permission to talk about.
No, that's okay.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, but
don't be sorry.
No, that actually I have to get specific permission from them to be able to post things.
See, you gotta love these like big guys in the game. You gotta be delicate with it. But maybe if we talk about not specific companies for that very thing.
Yeah, if we just talk about like at scale.
Yeah. So what do you think, or what do you see consulting then is like small, medium to large as a commercial facility, square footage wise? Is there like a number that you see repeatedly, or?
Well, most of the grows that I've worked and consulted for have been 30,000 plus. It's nowadays it has gone up on the high end to over 400,000 square feet. The problems that you run into in a 25,000 square foot facility aren't necessarily the same things you're going to run into in a much larger facility. I guess I should clarify that. They are the same problems, but they are much harder to control. And so you will see problems in a facility that's very large that might exist in a small facility, but they don't really get large enough to get on the radar. There's something that's easily solved because of, if a grow is properly built and it's, 30,000 square feet, then it's compartmentalized to the point where you've got separate flower rooms and you can actually contain any outbreaks relatively easily. But the larger your facility is, the more difficult it is to contain spores of pathogens and prevent things from kind of getting out of balance. Because if you've heard the expression, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Oh.
The more people you have in there, it's like one of the biggest kind of vectors of these things is employees, right?
Yeah.
Is people, either employees are not following sanitation protocol, or this is also often the case, management not having proper sanitation protocols in place. One thing that I've noticed is that people tend to use isopropyl alcohol in the industry as kind of like a cure-all. And in plant pathology, the worst offenders really are the fungi. Humans, bacteria are typically more of a danger to us because they like our body temperature and our pH better than fungi do. And so it's reversed in the plant world. And so fungal problems are the biggest problems really in cannabis production that I've seen. And so I'm gonna end there.
No, I think that's a great.
Maybe if I smoke more weed, that will focus my mind.
That's what we need. Shout out to Ben Wags. He's the glass blower behind that little piece there. You can find him in northern Colorado, doing it well. Thank you.
I feel classy.
I think it's funny, but I was thinking about just a different scale. Like I've roughly worked at 150 different commercial facilities by introducing or coming in as a consultant with a perpetual harvest, where people don't understand typically that you're combating, like if you have a vegetation room, we'll just start at like the base here is you need a veg that's supplying all of these different flower rooms. And we can obviously break those flower rooms down into like individual rows or trays, and that can create your perpetual harvest, or you just have rooms themselves coming down at a time. But that veg room, for the most part, is typically providing all of them. And I think same with mother room and clone rooms. I see a lot of facilities that say they are limited. I've worked at one that was as small as 1,500 square foot and commercial though, and went all the way up to 60,000 square foot is the largest I've ever personally worked with overseeing cultivation and everything. I think they all, like you said, run into this problem though with their initial designs, where their mother rooms are shared with the vegetation room or the clone room, or they have a lot of high traffic in these areas because they're putting them in the most like susceptible or compromised space because they can't put their flower room in a non-climate controlled room as easily as a mom room, or I don't know, some of these weird factors go into it where it's not ideal. And I know even the cultivators themselves like aren't loving this situation, but I see it as as a real problem and obstacle they're all facing.
Yeah, it really process in cannabis production, demand and the people that stepped in to supply it. The demand kind of moved faster than people could figure out how to appropriately scale production, appropriately, safely, cost effectively. And so a lot of companies had to build grows and then retrofit the grows as technology changed, for lighting or HVAC, or there were new testing regulations in place. So a lot of grows had to kind of build on what they already had. So I've seen a fair amount of grows that, if they had been built correctly originally, it would cost much less to operate them than it does, but you have to either walk to a place that's not convenient, because it was laid out originally a different way than it's now currently being used, or you have systems that are kind of attached onto other systems, and you have to kind of tinker and make sure that they're working well together. And so now we know a lot more about producing cannabis at scale. in terms of product quality and product safety. Uh, Perpetual harvest is really a great topic because, for example, powdery mildew is an obligate parasite. It has to have living tissue, so the spores can't live for more than most of the spores can't live for more than about 5 days. The types that are produced in a grow, at least, and they're somewhat delicate, and they can't live without a living host. And so these aren't things that can really hang around and contaminate you down the line, so your room gets sick again very easily. But the spores are very numerous and they're airborne, and so if you don't have good containment, like your air pressure, you don't have the correct pressure scheme basically to keep air from one place from going into another, then you can end up spreading. Not only spreading it throughout the facility, but you've still got the problem of your perpetual harvest system in that room, because typically you harvest one section at a time and clean, and then you've still got 3 other, 4 other, 5 other sections, however many the room is divided into, spitting out spores. So as soon as you put new plants in there, they're colonized again. And so you then have a compounded problem of having to pay more labor to spray, more pesticides, more risk of failure from spraying pesticides. And it just kind of snowballs.
Well, and with that, hallways, as I see a lot of cross contamination, because they're not only like harvesting in their hallways, but like most times they might have to cure, or all kinds of things happen in the hallways, I feel like. But I think it's a true obstacle for spores specifically, is like people that are combating powdered mildew for years upon years in a building, but they're limited to like this, probably improper processing space. The buildings aren't, say, like made with FRP board and all these nice surfaces that you can properly disinfect. But I feel like I don't know, I do see for the industry, like this is 14, 15 years later in Colorado, and a lot of accessibility to like testing even prior to its requirements. But I think limitations financially has happened to a lot of these facilities. I think there's a lot of players in the game that started in it when it was really inexpensive to get a license here, and it was like similar to Oklahoma or some of these other states. But over the last, 10 years, probably since recreational, the price to even get a license on average, we're talking retail, is starting, $1 million to $5 million to even participate. And then you look at a cultivation facility a couple years prior to the market, where it's at right now is, it'd be $1.5 million for a 3,000 square foot grow. And then that would be a shithole most times. And if you wanted something nice, like I remember Rare Dankness, like at the time, that was a really big deal. And watching that facility get built from the ground up, and it's, 60,000 square foot, but $30 million roughly before you even start employing people and, furnishing the building essentially. But I think that they'll run into these unexpected obstacles. They'll plan their whole first year, say they start from seeds. They'll have these really healthy, vigorous crops the first couple harvests. And after that first 2-3 years, I'll see their decline, and whether that be quality or weight itself, or, just these different factors. I feel like it's a repeated perpetual harvest problem.
Perpetual inoculation.
Yes.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So definitely, once you get a problem in a perpetual harvest system, it's very difficult to get rid of it. And then, especially when you've got something like Fusarium, or you've got Aspergillus, or Penicillium, or any other mold that can kind of just hang around and has spores that last like a long time. Those molds that I just mentioned don't have to have a living host to grow, and so we can culture them easily. But they can also live on dead material that just is sitting in, in gutters or trays. They can live on, dust in the corner if there's some water. And so you've got then the room, which you could disinfect fully if you didn't have plants in it all the time, that can be giving off spores. And then you've got the potting media, which will grow the spores pretty well. And you've got the areas under the plants and, gutters, all sorts of stuff. And so these things are all just kind of trading inoculum back and forth. And so unless you can empty the entire room and sanitize it, you will see, product quality issues or yield issues or both, because, the yield issues come when you can't really properly, you don't really spray enough.
Yeah.
But if you spray too much, you end up with product quality issues too, and so the point I was trying to make earlier, that I had a stoner moment and forgot, was the isopropyl alcohol is used kind of to clean all types of things. Fungi are the worst offenders in the disease kingdom, in the plant kingdom, and basically isopropyl doesn't really work to inactivate fungal spores, and so it doesn't do the main job that people use it to do. It's good for killing bacteria, but not terribly good for killing fungi.
I think that's something, I'm so glad that you came back to that, because it's something that I seriously want to highlight, underline, exclamation point, is because all these facilities that are combating HLVD, Fusarium, like Pythium, botrytis, all these different things, is I think that they all use iso alcohol. The propofol. Oh my God, iso. Thank you. Is they use like the same cup, like, and I see like even top quality facilities doing this, where in the room when they're pruning or cutting clones, or whether that's the the cutting board that they're cutting clones on, or whatever, is they're typically not using bleach, or things that are a little bit more effective, I think, in both regards, where I think it's just that habit of, like, when the industry first started, I almost see that as being what everybody's go-to was, like, but I think people are really scared of bleach for some reason, when bleach is really effective, I think, and cheap.
Bleach is effective, for sure. However, I've used bleach a lot. That's what I used to use for tissue culture, and still do sometimes, depending on the situation. But one day I found some information online that said that you can acidify bleach to make it more powerful as a sterilant, and so it makes it 80 to a couple hundred times more effective. And it said, and it was in a forum that I read this, guilty as charged, but it said a pH of 6 has this, increase in efficacy. A pH of 5 has this increase. A pH of 4, everybody dies.
Wow.
That's what the guy said. And so I thought, well, that's a little alarmist. Who is this guy? I looked at who it was, and he wrote the book that I learned how to do asymbiotic orchid seed germination, which is very similar to tissue culture from. Wow. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll listen to that. So if you have, an incident where somebody somehow fumbles some pH down, and it falls into a big thing of bleach, it can off-gas hypochlorous acid, which will potentially, cause you irreparable harm. Wow. And so bleach is, it's good, it's cheap, it's somewhat non-toxic. It's not that so much as it represents like a serious hazard, and it's very reactive as well. And so bleach also will oxidize tools that you use, and so it's difficult to use it to
with scissors, stainless steel.
Yeah. And so with HLVD, for example, like, there aren't really very good solutions other than bleach. Like, bleach is kind of what we got to work with.
Do you have like a recommendation that to stay away from? I mean, as an alternative, I guess, then to bleach, for using realistically through these tasks. like where this is safe?
On HLVD?
Like if you were just a normal employee in a facility getting paid $15 an hour and you were entry level introduction to the game and your boss told you to go defoliate that room, you're like, all right, I'm not going to do the SOP that this man told me to do. I am going to wear the same clothes every day this week, and I'm going to go water all my friends' grows and smoke and then come back to this facility. So I think that the most realistic thing where they're not going to carry paper towels, like I've noticed that with working with large staffs and like when they're moving numbers, like you can't have, it's not ideal. I mean, like honestly, I hate to ask this question like this, but and realistically is I think is there something like that's just like easy, and I hate to put it in those terms, but where somebody could use a rag that they could use on their scissors in between all of the plants with a solution? Or
it depends on the pathogen.
Really. The pathogen specifically.
Really, since pathogens are a bunch of different groups.
So vast.
You know, like for example, like fungi and bacteria are like completely different, kingdoms, right? We're eukaryotes, fungi are eukaryotes, but bacteria are prokaryotes. They have like a totally different kind of base plan. And so things that will kill fungi, will also kind of kill us. And they won't necessarily kill fungi, and they won't necessarily kill viroids,
like penicillin or something.
Right,
like,
and so you really have to have a combination of ways, of physical and chemical controls, basically to ensure that you're going to be all right. And it's going to vary by the state to some degree, also like what you're allowed to use. And so it's hard for me to give a blanket recommendation for any one product, right?
I think it's just difficult because like the chances of somebody paying a consultant or professional or submitting their testing, like when these pest and disease issues occur, are very slim, I think, for the mass majority. Like I think the big dogs out there and these companies that are really taking this seriously, or on the flip, the small mom and pop shops that are really, boutique and keeping it tight. But I think 80% of the market, honestly, I think unfortunately falls in the middle where they think they're doing the best. They'll show you their stuff and they'll feel real confident about it. And it's not that you don't appreciate it or say like, I don't know, you appreciate it. But I feel like, I don't think that they know this. Like I hate to say it, but when I go into a facility and I see all these red stalks and hear about these like uptake problems or anything like that, it's like, they have no idea what they're really saying to you. Typically they'll be like, I've got fungus gnats and I can't get them eradicated, and I've got powder mildew in room 4, or they really aren't looking at this like, I'm going to submit this tissue sample to a facility to have it actually properly diagnosed with what type of fusarium we're working with, or HLVD, or I mean whatever it is.
Yeah, totally.
It is I just think it's unfortunate, but I don't think a lot of them do it. And
also, I mean, to cut the sting of that a little bit, it's it's expensive to do testing.
Expensive, yeah.
Right? It's with these problems, it's typically much easier to plan at the front end. Like so like quality management is like kind of loosely quality assurance at the front end and quality control at the back end. And so quality assurance kind of consists of mapping out processes and accountability structures to make sure that the product ends up like like you want it to. And,
yeah.
And then quality control is on the back end, where you test products prior to their hitting the shelves to make sure that they are safe, and then you can catch anything that your quality assurance missed on the front end, right? And so,
yes.
The old saw that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is very true in this, because if you set up a grow properly with proper HVAC and have the correct containment, you test your inputs, you have proper compartmentalization within the grow, so like you don't have too many plants in too big a space, because that becomes difficult from a pathology standpoint to keep clean.
Yes.
Then you're much less likely to suffer the very costly problems later of like retrofitting and product failures, liability lawsuits, that sort of thing. Because one thing that I see kind of consistently is that a lot of operators don't understand that they can still get a product liability lawsuit,
Yeah,
against
definitely.
them if even though they're passing their state testing. Like state testing has some gaps because the state regulators are still catching up, just like the rest of the industry is, and still we're finding out daily about new problems, right, in the industry. And so,
That's true.
well, we should all kind of be like, wow, good job. We're adaptable. We've made it this far in the industry. We still have to continue to adapt to these new changes. And unfortunately, if you're all the little problems tend to add up in terms of yield. Like when your HVAC doesn't exactly do what it's supposed to, your yield pays the price to some degree, and then you also open up the door for these problems. And so, like, things can be compounded and grow very easily. And so that seems to be what is burying a lot of people right now, is that when the price was high, that's when the systems were developed. And so they weren't developed necessarily as efficiently as they could have been.
Yeah.
Right, and so now the price per pound is exceeding, or is less than the price it costs to produce it for some producers. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a really that's very important to talk about and bring to attention. The home growers, I think for them too, it's like it makes it a tricky spot because they're scared to submit something to a lab or they can't. Just with state regulations differing from place to place, and it seems like a lot of labs are terrified themselves to. It's not that they wouldn't, but it's just too much of a risk without a metric tracking system or whatever internal system your state's using. But I think that there's going to be people that still want to know how to do a perpetual harvest and
yeah,
that have no idea why, what are the benefits of that? Why are companies operating that way? Why should you maybe look into it at a home grow versus just having one big harvest a year or a couple? If you can have that consistent.
perpetual harvest, like it wouldn't be a thing if it didn't check a lot of boxes, right? So you got it's hard to have a production staff that will hang around to just not be employed for certain periods, right? And so downtime is something you don't want to have, just in terms of keeping the machine of the company running. You want to be able to harvest, like, in not only manageable chunks, but fairly consistently, so that you can have people that can show up, 5-6 days a week or whatever is required to keep staff. And so, there's that. There's that you can put a lot of different stages in one room, so you can have multiple people doing the same thing in the same room. You can have a harvest crew harvesting, and you can have people doing plant work on other plants. But perpetual. I think just kind of off the cuff right now, I'm thinking perpetual harvest. What about semi-perpetual harvest?
Yeah.
By that I mean like two or three consecutive runs, and then you take everything back to zero.
Have a clean restart.
Exactly.
It's nice.
And so, like, a corollary for that in agriculture would be like sort of like clean stocks and potatoes. Like, by law, you can't reproduce the same clean plant stock that you get from a lab that's been tissue cultured and had all the pathogens removed. You can't propagate that for more than 7 years vegetatively by law. And so for potatoes, you have to go back to clean stock about every 7 years. Now in cannabis, that's kind of a stretch as a
7 years is tough. Like
comparison, but anyway.
The 7-year rule, though, is like that with everything. It seems like a stabilization of genetics, like really seeing like the potential of I don't know. The 7 years, I feel like, goes into so many different parts of.
Ag takes a long time. I mean, to get a wheat variety ready for market is, 4 years or so. Last I checked. And so to get a cannabis variety ready, it takes Well, it depends on who's doing it, I should say. But regardless, it takes a lot of inbreeding for cannabis because it's much more heterozygous than wheat, for example. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say that. Wheat's an allohexaploid. But that's a different topic. Tune into my other podcast that talks about wheat.
That was funny. I think...
That's not a thing.
I think for these big guys out there, I think that a lot of people, like, say I went into, I'm trying to think if I want to pretend of purchasing a grow or going in as a consultant is either one. I think let's go in as consultant. So if you go into a facility and they're having aphid problems, so you walk in and that's what they call you over. You come down there, you're confirming, yes, they have aphids. Typically, you're confirming a whole bunch of other things too, or you're going through and saying like, yes, we do need to submit testing for this to confirm this, but it looks like you have this, and this going on, at least as your beginning steps. And people will think these things are mild, like fungus gnats or thrips. You know, it comes in like every effing soil bag that you will like find lately, or you don't know how long a grow store has had something stored in the back, or just all these kinds of things. So not everybody can go bake their soil real quick. And in Colorado, you're not like running outside with your frozen pallet. Like you're hoping that the shit comes even like fluffy at that point. And nonetheless, all the other problems. So I think a lot of growers I talk to, they don't like to use pesticides. It kind of frustrates me because the perception of pesticides can be so inaccurate amongst, I think, a vast majority of people. I'm not like in love with pesticides, but
yeah, but it's a double-edged sword, right? Like pesticides, it's just like a person taking medication, like for a psychiatric condition. Like often that doesn't do all the work, right? There's still like work you've got to do around that. Like there would be therapy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like so in cannabis, it's like. What the fuck were we just talking about?
With like the risk of like if you God damn it. Sorry. The risk.
I gotta stop making these analogies that are like off, like way off.
No, hold on. It's gonna come back. This is a good one. I think that
so pesticides don't do everything, right? An integrated pest management program has to take into account not just like what pesticides you use, like what kills what, but also the life cycle of the pest, because you need to know how often to spray, right? Like there's scouting that you need to do. You have to have a team that can, or have individual grow managers that are trained to like see what is that? Is that a russet mite? Because I don't know how many times, literally, no idea. I've been in a grow and watched a group of growers sit around discussing what might be going wrong.
Yeah.
And get nowhere, right? Yeah.
Except for a lot of frustrated people.
I've also found some growers that were just incredible growers and figured stuff out that was really impressive. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm talking shit. I'm a grower. I grew weed the first time when I was 12. I love growing stuff. But I also love standing around talking about what might be going on without really figuring it out.
No,
but if you don't know what you're looking at, all you can do is guess. Yeah. And if you layer on additional pesticide or additional nutrients to try to correct things rather than really either finding someone that knows or doing a really deep dive, like finding who's smart in your grow, like who can you assign to check out research for half a day and then try to figure out how to look for these things and find out what the symptoms are.
Well, and I think that with the pesticides as well, it's like a lot of people I see use them so it's okay. So I think there's a misconception and a miseducation with this particularly is people will think when they spot whatever type of insect or infestation they're having and they've actually identified it, everybody goes into panic mode. Nobody feels good seeing that shit crawl around and you can feel it on you and just, exactly. We all But I think the problem is though, is a lot of people will go through and they'll do a drench immediately, or they'll start spraying them really hard, or they'll start applying these pesticides too close together. So what people don't realize is if you're using something like Pyganic, I love Pyganic.
What's the active in that?
That one is pyrethrin.
Pyrethrin. Yeah.
Pyrithium.
Pyrethrum?
Yeah.
Like from
I'm just giving up.
chrysanthemums?
I drank wine before this. I'm just giving up. Yeah, that's exactly what it's extracted from. The flowers themselves. And so I love that product because it's really effective when you first apply it. Like for aphids, I'll say, or fungus gnats even, or thrips. It's great if you apply it immediately. You'll see like a degradation in this whatever you're working with.
It's got great knockdown if it's not resistant already.
If it hasn't been something exactly. But I think that like with that though is it's only effective for or you can only use it within 48 hours, the application itself, but the product's time, though, of being effective on the plant itself is 14 to 21 days. So I'll see somebody go in and they'll use Pyganic because they're panicked about whatever they're treating, and they'll use it twice or 3 times in 10 days or whatever because their friend is like, no, you can't let them repopulate, or you can't. And it's weird because you have to look at both factors. It's like, yes, you have this insect that you have to take care of or identify it in its life cycle, yes. But when you're using these pesticides as well, is they all differ in the time frame that they're actually within the plant and actually creating this resistance and working, And so when people start really going to town on these crops, and then it's not even if you're seeing burning or not. Like I see misuse of sulfur and things like, obviously I can't talk tonight, so I don't even know if I want to try anymore. I just kind of want to skip it. But
I'm right there with you. So
but I promise I was professional. Yeah, jeez. So Azamax though is like azidactrin. Here we go.
Azidacrin. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the extract from neem oil, right?
From neem trees, yeah, but they're different. Like the compound, yeah.
A funny side note. I once watched an entomologist, a guy I admire a lot. His name is Whitney Cranshaw. He's done a fair amount of work on like the pests of hemp.
Oh.
And he's a professor of entomology and.
Like
anyway, I saw him get super worked up and talk about the neem industry because he was saying that the neem oil gets imported as the raw product or whatever, or it gets processed overseas. Long story short, they take out the azidacrin, which is I believe it's like a insect growth regulator.
Yeah, it is.
And then separate it from the neem, and then neem is very highly associated with having azidacrin in it, but the vast majority of neem products on the market don't have any in it because it's all been extracted and used for the azidacrin products, right?
Well, and the actual consistency of the product itself is like, I personally don't like to use neem on a lot of things just because it really is like a puddled, like it's just thick, it's just a thick product, I feel like. And when you're using it in a commercial grow, like everybody's mixing products and doing things, is I think it beads easier and kind of allows, I don't know, it's just not my favorite, but but Azamax though is like we all love sulfur. Nobody likes to like say that out loud, but your plants actually love it.
I admire it for its yellow color and its ability to kill fungi.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, russet mites and broad mites, I've seen it like just do work. And like I think obviously it's not ideal. Don't be spraying your shit like
anywhere near flower.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean like as a veg,
because under heat it decomposes into several things that are either extremely caustic or extremely toxic.
But those are products like you can't use or you shouldn't be using that within 14 days with the risk of phytotoxicity and like some of these other components though is I think you're ruining the effectiveness of these products. You're stressing at your plant. Of course you hate pesticides after that. Your shit's like fried. It's miserable. Like you still got bugs. Now you just got probably a flared up plant as a result. But I think if you really use them properly, I hate to compare it like to a gun. People probably don't like this analogy, but I feel like pesticides are like that. I feel like if you're using these things incorrectly,
if you wave them around in public, the cops come. Is that?
It's kind of like that.
Oh,
you can't be just like sword fighting in flour.
Maybe in Boulder.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry, go back.
Oh, that's hilarious. But I think that like there's a time and a place when it's great to use these products. And I think it's more sad to look at a plant that's being ate alive, by this stuff essentially and damage.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. They have their place for sure. I'm a much bigger fan of using process and like vigorous plant growth and just kind of proper process controls to make sure that to do like the heavy lifting,
the resilience.
Yeah, because the chemical controls are great, but they all have something about them that's not great, right? Whether it's, direct toxicity, indirect, whatever, whether it's plant, phytotoxicity, whether it complicates things, like for example, oil and sulfur, you can't spray together. Found that one out. That was exciting. Luckily it was my plants and nobody else's.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, when I'm at work, I never just assume that a combination of anything will work. You know what I mean? But
it's good to test it though on your own plants. I mean,
I actually kept a population of russet mites in my garage for 9 months to study them because
they are a good one to keep around.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Everyone I told that was like, "Oh my God, did he touch me? I mean, did he just use my lighter? No,
that's hilarious. Get out of my car."
Russet mites do not travel well on human beings. Apparently, this is some of the little research that is out. Yeah, but
how do they travel most frequently? Just the plant itself?
Yeah, infested cuttings. I'm thinking that because of the great hemp bubble in 2019 and prior, there are russet mites throughout the country now where there weren't necessarily, and I think they're going to be making their ways into grows, just kind of by brute force at some point. Just to finish the thought about before I lose it, because of this magnificent Sherlock pipe and the delicious cannabis contained therein. Anyway, russet mites have this cool habit. I guess it's kind of cool. You can admire your enemy, right?
It's true.
Anyway, when they get to a certain density on the leaf, they start to migrate toward the edges of the leaf, and then they form these long chains. Now, like russet mites are microscopic, and so they'll form these chains so that wind will actually blow them and disperse them off. It's very similar to the way a fungal conidium, like a conidiophore will spit out conidia, like powdery mildew, for example, has a stalk and then these kind of chain of conidia or spores that can just kind of break off, and so it's almost like a totally different type of creature or organism evolved a very similar sort of dispersal method. But anyway, I guess you do what works, right? And so they can get blown around, they can get transferred between plants when plants rub against each other. One thing I did find from watching them, the thing I was really looking for was on the undersurface of the leaf, where they're found mostly, the population density seemed to be uniform, and so meaning that it's like penguins from the air. There was some sort of repulsions that kept them equidistant from each other, and so you could map out the density in a square centimeter, right, or whatever, and then compare it to other strains that were infested with different microscopic morphology of the surface. So non-secretory trichomes, for example. I found that the finer the pubescence on the underside of the leaf, the finer the the hair-like structures, the trichomes that don't actually secrete cannabinoids. The less dense the population was, basically. And so it was impeding their ability to move around and kind of do what they do. And so each little region wouldn't support, it appeared, more than one russet mite, right? And so you could use that as a way to gauge how breeding for certain characters could increase resistance to like things that you wouldn't normally think, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so, anyway, that's interesting. Hopefully, somebody can use it. I'm not breeding cannabis anymore, so except for a hobby. But
I feel like people really appreciate all of that information.
And take it with a grain of salt. It came out of a garage.
I remember hearing that russet mites. I actually remember facing this problem and not knowing what they were, and nobody knew. Is when I was a head grower at headquarters, it was like 2011, 2012 that like we did fully organic, and it was beautiful. But our plants were huge. They would veg for like 6 months to 9 months, like, and we'd flip them. They were seriously like 15, 16 foot tall indoors.
Wow.
And
I was just like kind of trying to do the math around that.
They were so beautiful.
Those are big plants.
Honestly, I miss those days. But it was such a different style, and we'd pull individual plants at harvest so that we could finish like 14, 15 week strains, 16 weeks, and you just pull that plant, and they would be so massive that it covered. This is back in the day, you know, you could only do so much. And so, yeah, there was like 80 of these plants that would flower, and you'd like walk under them. Anyways, God, I'm going to do it again. So I had a point. Oh, the russet mites. So we started having these problems where our quality, like, I'm not just saying this, I sound like every other douche, but our quality was really good. We were winning all the competitions in the state. We were like doing good with potency at the time. That was like valued, and we were testing highest in the state. Really, it just felt like we had healthy plants, and it just felt good. So we cared though, and it was a small grow, and it was 3,500 square foot. So it was just, we had 3 people on our staff, you know, and not a lot of cross contamination, things like that. And so our plants, I don't know, they did great. And when I think back now, like the amount of time they were in veg and sharing a flower room and all of these things, like, I don't know, they did great. But we started having this, this problem with like, this is when you would pay for testing as a grow before all the other things were required, or you would have to pay for these things, and you would just choose to do it. And it wasn't necessarily for anything but maybe advertising and internal R&D. Like, but we started seeing certain strains like yield kind of drop at first, and then the potency started decreasing, and we were like, what in the fuck? And like, and you could see it when you would walk into the flower rooms. Like, we just all were sad, like all of a sudden. And like, you know, and we did have microscopes, and like, this is when like, honestly, like, you had to be very secretive about what you were doing even then, and like, you couldn't go on Amazon and order a freaking like whatever you needed to look at something.
These are
like,
for tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you had to be so discreet. The grocery stores only had like those crappy little eye loop, like maybe 50x, like maybe 100, and like it just wasn't good enough. And so I remember none of us could figure out what this problem was, and it like got to a point where 6 months into it, we were like, what do we do? And I remember we had to go to CSU for some side project stuff with some friends. And I feel like that's the only reason we were able to, or they were able to identify that these were russet mites at the time. And so I heard in 2013, it's ridiculous, but I heard that they came in from Home Depot, from California, from China, an order of plants that was like massive to all these like Cali locations of Home Depot, and that they were transferred over from that, and then they sprint to hemp and blah blah blah. This is just what I heard back then, but I remember it wasn't like, there was a lot of good companies, I won't say their names, but it was very small niche Boulder community, and everybody got hit with it at the same time. And then we figured out the key. I won't say the rest of that either, but we figured out the sulfur, and it was magic.
Yeah, it works well. Interesting thing about the sulfur is that, like, if you burn it, it doesn't work the same way. Like, burning sulfur doesn't kill them.
But powder mildew.
But elemental micronized sulfur will kill them or inhibit their reproduction or something. But it's magic. It works well. However, the problem with that elemental sulfur is that it's not in solution, right? It's just little tiny particles. So cannabis is sticky, and so it will stick if you use it too close to when it starts to flower, and then you can end up inhaling burning sulfur, which is like, it's like hydrochloric acid is one of the things that it forms on contact. It's like sulfur dioxide and sulfur oxide, and a few other things. Any chemists out there, forgive me if I'm butchering it, but then mucous membranes in your lungs, have water on them, and then when those things combine with water, they turn into I don't remember which acid, but a strong one. It's like sulfuric or anyway, whatever it is, it's not something you want. I think it had a pH of like 1.5 or something. So not hyper caustic, but caustic enough that you don't want it in your lungs. I mean, I did use sulfur actually once on a home grow, and I was advised not to do this, and like I've done more times than I'd like to admit in my life. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to try it, and I'm going to figure this out. Anyway, I smoked the product of that home grow. I am now a believer that you don't want to smoke weed that has sulfur on it. Basically. So it works great, but
you can't be misusing it.
Can't misuse it. Dose makes the poison, right? Dose makes the poison is one of my favorite expressions. Like, there's plenty of things that we encounter daily and absorb or inhale or ingest in some way that are poisonous. However, it's the quantity really that matters with a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I think if you get into a proper IPM where say your clones from the moment you take clones, if you're using a preventative treatment, whether that's for the spreading of pathogens or fungal bacteria, I mean, anything, pests, like whatever you're targeting, I'm going to use like, let's say Azamax. It is a go-to for me with clones. It's one thing that targets multiple pests. Like instead of having to spread out my IPM and be delicate, because it's annoying, honestly, when you're counting out your days. If you do this properly, you have to take 14 days right there for your first pyganic treatment. We talked about that in neem and pyganic. So they're both counterintuitive. Like they cannot work together. They don't like each other. So you have to count out these 14 days. But in the meantime, though, I don't see a lot of gardens that have one pest. Like it'd be great if it worked like that, but it's like typically you do have 3 or 4 insects once your plant starts declining or degrading with some health problems. I see multiple things going on, and you can't use one product as a fix-all. So you take this Azamax, and the moment that I cut my clones is use it as the label says, of course. But I feel like
that is a federal legal document. People.
Yes, highlight.
I mean, really, like
exclamation point.
It is extremely important.
It is very important. But if you follow follow the rules, follow the instructions for reals, then you can take this product, and I'll dip my clones in it at a diluted rate of like one of their lowest mixed rates, and I'll dip my whole clone in there and have it like where at least I can rest assured that it's targeting russets, like thrips, fungus gnats, like some of my main ones that I know I'm at risk for. And it's technically or a natural product. It's not even labeled as organic. It's natural. So I'll use this. Got to be careful nowadays. And so I'll use this. And then as my clones are, getting ready to finish, it's like, say we're on day 10 to 14 is like, depending on how much you want them rooted and all these other factors. But, I'll pull them, transplant them, and if I'm not combating an issue like something in my soil or my medium is, say it's just like spider mites. It's not ideal, but you're more worried about the top of your new growth than the bottom.
Yeah,
is I feel like you can take and do a treatment like 3 or 4 days after that transplant gets settled, and then your plants are so young still, you're not even at day 20, and I feel like the half-life of the most oh my gosh,
most possessed pesticides. You use those to kill ghosts.
Most pesticides. I don't know what my problem is. It's great shit.
It's all good. No, I've been doing the same thing.
Oh my goodness.
We could blame it on the weed.
The weed was good
this
tonight.
Magnificent, classy Sherlock pipe. I feel like I should be holding this. If I had a smoking jacket, that would be for one odd in this century, but for another.
But then you have to take that. Where you're counting out from that point now 14 days. You're hoping that your shit doesn't get flared by somebody else coming in or like anything altering anything or upsetting the plants. And I think then you can introduce sulfur like where you're still young enough, because like you said, it's a fine line. Is to me, you have a 2-week window in veg. I like to hit mine like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I flip them into flower. Like I know people get all sensitive about that, but I'll make sure I'm limited to 2 applications from 0 days to whatever point that is. I veg my plants a lot longer than most people, but I feel like if you use these things right, then like I see that the health of the plant, like you said, by the time you get to flower, they're so healthy and they're so resilient, and you're using products that are compliant, they are natural or organic. Like people think I'm like crazy with with all the gasoline on my plants, I think, but,
like actual gasoline.
I think I just
because that's intriguing. No, I'm probably do not want to smoke gasoline.
No, but I think I'm so against using these things though in flower, and like I do see most misuse with pesticides. That's why I specialize in it now, is because I did see so many improper applications. And it's not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I don't think there was a lot of resources or people that felt comfortable or safe to be like, hey, I don't know this. Don't go annihilate my my image or my business or whatever this is. And I think these are all things that we all combat and just nobody likes to talk about. But
yeah, I mean, it's also really, it's like how you use sulfur matters a lot, right?
Yeah.
You can use it with great effect and relatively safely if you use it only until basically the plant has grown to where all the parts that it's on are going to be cut off as part of the host, part of the growing process, right? So if you time it so that you're making sure your plants are completely clean by like 4 weeks before flower, then there's almost no chance there's going to be sulfur on that end product unless it gets transferred back onto it from those lower parts, which is why, like, once you've got effective kill and your plants are clean, like doing some sort of rinse is important, making sure that like you clean off the trays in such a way that it doesn't splash back onto the plants. I mean, there's kind of a lot of minutia to it, but
the trays I see is another thing I'm glad that you mentioned, is the trays with cross-contamination. It's awesome to see that most people are growing with irrigation. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of it. I think
what kind of, like drip irrigation?
Drip irrigation, drain to waste or whatever, is most standard that I see. I mean, you see deep water culture, I guess, with a lot of greenhouses, and I'm trying to think. I don't see a lot of God damn. I don't even know. Sorry. I was going to say recirculating systems, but I was going to be a little bit more specific than that. But
yeah, recirculating systems are hard because of, like pathogens and
the only
pH and all that stuff. But like, I haven't seen, well, I'm going to stop right there because I haven't really seen a lot of recirculating systems in cannabis other than just like ebb and flow trays that get, like refilled. But
I had to do a job at a great hash company, but they were like very limited with, their bedroom was in a hallway of an old building, right? And it was awful. This building was terrible. I had one thermostat control the whole facility, like the whole everything. So it was a brick wall that was in this bedroom though, and because it was a hallway that went to the flower room and they were touching basically, is it's not ideal, but they had only 40 plants when I had started this job. They had 40 plants in the room from their head grower, their previous setup, and I did recirculating because I could fit six 4x8 trays, and they didn't have waste lines, right? And you can't have the cross contamination of the flower room. It was already like the lights were opposite, obviously, and they were already. Anyways, lots of issues. And so I took the plant count though to like 840 or something off of that same space, and like when I look at it as far as like conservation of water and like the thing, it's not ideal. The point is with pest and disease issues, it's not ideal at all. But
there are also workarounds. I mean, it's the funny thing is like there's almost infinite ways to grow cannabis. Cannabis is responsive to just a wide variety of different ways of growing it. I grew orchids commercially for a few years, and that's the kind of corollary I like to use. Orchids take, the ones that I was growing take about 4 to 5 years to bloom the first time from seed and have to be like sown in vitro. And I remember in my first cannabis interview, actually who I ultimately went to work for, they said, "Wait, you grow a plant for 4 years, and then you and then you sell it for how much?" But anyway, the orchids. The reason I brought those up is that they aren't necessarily amenable to a bunch of different types of culture. Like, oh, right here behind me, those are the roots of a Japanese orchid. It's like super zoomed in. That's moss coming out of it. But you can't grow that necessarily easily in hydroponic culture and in a bag of cocoa and outside of your house in your backyard, right? Like,
yeah.
And so cannabis is we're lucky in that it's difficult to grow very good cannabis at scale. Like, props to people that do that. But there are many different ways to get there, right? Yeah, and so absolutely. Like if you have recirculating systems, for example, I mean, you can put in UV disinfection, right?
Yeah.
Or you can do other things that kind of mitigate that part of the risk if the rest of your system complements it well and allows the plants to grow, really vigorously. That can balance it out.
I think that's like the thing about the commercial scale now is like, I don't think that financially it's hard. It's really hard because you want to like participate in like these people's dreams and like life's investments or a side gig that they don't really care about. It goes one way or the other. Yeah, but
I've seen all those things. Sure.
But I feel like it is a big investment at this point, and it is expensive with testing and just all the things that we said. But it's too much. Back then, you could have swung it where if you threw together a grow and it was like a crappy building that you were building out in phases and like things like that, and pretty simple build outs, like the concepts themselves and the protocols and separation amongst the rooms and whatnot. But I think too now is like you really should be trying your best to really do it right if you're going to do it at all, because I think that throwing together a couple Botanicare tables and like doing these things, yes, it'll do it, but it's not ideal, and it's not the best sterilization system.
Yeah, it's like it's difficult to when you're bootstrapping it, like you have to cut corners. I saw bootstraps actually holding a reservoir hose on once. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. It didn't happen. But it's difficult to just kind of keep adding modifications, to make things work for sure. But I can't remember where I was going with that. What strain is this?
I know, it is just annihilating me tonight. I never get this high. I think I haven't been smoking during the day. To be honest, I don't know though. I have this bag I can check, but I feel like it's not classy that it's in it. Anyways.
Because we keep it classy.
Yeah, it's Zaza.
Zaza.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That doesn't illuminate things for me very
much,
unfortunately. But
it tastes really good though.
Man, I can't remember what I was like, what point. I had a point. I was like, yes, I'm going to bring this all together. And then I was like, oh, shit, yeah.
That's what was like so frustrating. Like,
I'm pretty sure it was about weed.
Andrew was saying this earlier. Like, I don't know if we should get high before the show because...
Right?
Yeah, and then...
We should do two versions of this show.
I think you're right.
I'm proposing this.
I'm already on the same page.
And then run them segment by segment opposite each other, just so that, like you see one and then you see the same version, and we'll cover the same material.
No wine, no blunt.
I thought of doing that with
we should do this.
mushrooms and making fun of pop culture on YouTube, just like recording me and my friend doing that. And
that sounds nice.
Yeah, that it would be an interesting sort of social experiment.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's really nice. We had some people checking us out, watching our shenanigans tonight. But I do think that we should do another episode where I'll behave. I won't say any of the things, and I won't even cuss. I need to stop cussing too. It's like a serious, anyways. But I'm working on it. But I think that we should come back with I want to break down like how people can see the scales change, where everybody thinks that you can just take a 4x8 diagram and just scale it up. And like, and I've heard really intelligent people say this, and like people that do have a background growing, and like, it's not like that. Like, I mean, maybe within a very small parameter I could see, or a very specific something. But as a mass though, you're looking at the difference that can even come from like reservoirs being placed in a room versus outside of a room, and why you would do that, and like the humidity levels changing, or when you're harvesting in these hallways versus, or when you don't have a break room, and like the cross contamination that comes from, shoes to hair to, I know that most facilities I've worked at, the staff has no intentions of hurting anybody, or like they are knowledgeable, they do have, but
totally. And I don't want to sound like I was talking shit, because I've been that guy being like, well, I think it's this, I'm gonna try it, right? Like, not in a cannabis grow that was growing weed for people, but I've definitely done it in I've grown a bunch of different crops and ornamentals and stuff commercially. And so like I've definitely been the guy that was like, you know what, I think we're gonna try fire, like, you know what I mean? Not really, but like just going off the cuff, and that's how you learn. I don't learn shit by being right, that's for sure.
No, I think that's so cool though that you said that, because I think that they bring the pest problems most times. Like, I remember working with this girl, it was awesome. But I've had a couple like female only staffs, and like I thought this would be the coolest thing ever. It is not. And so but she was telling me we had a bad aphid problem. Like, they called me in for this aphid problem. It was super bad. Like, and I remember just walking in and just being like, wow. And where you could just immediately you're just like, I want to wear give me the trash bag, give me a husky really fast. But I feel like not good. So she didn't know, she wasn't familiar with an aphid, which is fine. But she was like, I have them in my house. And I remember like just that look on her face is, it's not like, she did this on purpose, or like, or anything like that. And she went to school for biology and botany, or something related to one or the other. And I feel like she worked in the farm life. So I don't know. It's weird.
You don't know what you don't know. I mean,
exactly.
The aphid we see in cannabis is, I believe, the rice root aphid, which is like not really a pest of note in other crops. And so like you kind of don't. I always use the analogy of like when you cross the street, you look left and right for cars, but you look up for falling pianos, because
so
like
true.
You never know.
Russets, broadmides, like you said, they're so flippin' tiny, and unless you know like.
Not in a cute way.
Not in a cute way.
No.
Oh my gosh, actually in the opposite way.
Scaled large, they would be horrifying.
That's what I mean. Is one time I was looking under like a real good microscope at those bad boys, and I did the jump. When something actually scares you, like you think that they're ginormous when you look in those really good ones.
Yep.
Thing is crazy looking. Like,
yeah, they the stuff of nightmares. Certainly, they are. They have 4 legs, and they're in the front, and they're long and weird looking, like a. I don't know. It's and they move weird.
Have you seen like
and
a Bug's Life?
They eat trichomes. They eat trichomes.
Yeah, devil bugs.
It's horrifying. Maybe they just don't know they're evil, and they're just so high all the time. They just kind of blunder through, and they're like, I don't want to cause all this problem. There's all this delicious weed,
Do you ever go through these like weird phases and like moments?
All the time, without qualifying.
Where you'll be like sad for the like insects. Like sometimes I'll like be using something that I'm just like, God, what a miserable like way to go. And like, and the more you do see them under microscopes, the more you start to appreciate them. Like I see them almost like a Disney movie or like something like that. Like some of them are like Eeyores to all the way to like, I don't know, like A Bug's Life did cover a good spectrum of bases. Like ants,
For episode 7, an explication of A Bug's Life. It's got some quotes. I like it.
I feel like you gotta love them and hate them all at the same time.
For sure. I mean, like having an appreciation for the way they do business. Like I feel that way about bindweed. Like if somebody can figure out a way to commercialize something made out of bindweed, they're set. I mean, that thing makes tubers like 8 feet under the ground, and so you can't really kill it easily by pulling it up. That just seems to make it angry.
Really?
I saw at the horticulture farm at CSU. A student had tried to get rid of the bindweed by running it over with some kind of tractor with a cutting blade, like for clearing clearing out weeds. And or no, it was a tiller. Sorry, it was a tiller. And so what they did was just effectively propagate the bindweed into little sections like this, which immediately rooted and started growing. And so they made this like really lush carpet of bindweed.
Wow.
Right? But anyway, so yeah, you can totally have an appreciation.
I bet it made their feet itch.
Does it make your feet itch?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, I don't know. I feel like it just would. I don't know either, but
it might. It looks like.
I feel like any kind of weed. I'm allergic to weeds, so that's probably why I feel like that. I feel like a dog. You know when your dog's got like. Anyways, talk about that.
The only thing I'm allergic to is alcohol. I'll break out.
Oh,
in
like
handcuffs.
you actually are allergic to it?
Yeah, I break out in handcuffs.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm just kidding.
That's hilarious.
I don't drink alcohol.
That's the first time I ever. I know none of my friends drink. It's like crazy. Like I'm saying like the whole squad. Like shout out to the Adam Dunn show is like nobody drinks on that show. Like I don't know. I've just realized that you guys are all purified and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Well, Andrew, is there anything like you would like to add? I don't know if we're actually going to end up posting this one. This one might be a secret one just for the live viewers tonight. I might be a better co-host next time. I don't know. Or we just post.
And yeah, I would also say for my part, I would plan to be a better guest next time and actually have an idea of kind of the continuity of what I want to.
Guys, I'm going to be honest. Today was, I put a lot of pressure on Andrew. I was like, listen, we got to get back rolling. We got to make moves. We got to talk about this. I know people are struggling. Speaking of that, okay, real fast I do have a lot of clones for sale right now. I'm trying to do a thing that, you know, people can trust and feel good when they get clones where they're not like, I know they're not like happy with the pricing right now, but I feel like they don't understand the value of clean cuts versus dirty. Or I don't know, Andrew, but I feel like I want to see people identifying, looking at physically healthier plants. And like, my goal is to like, not just with like clones and genetics. I don't mean that like an a-hole, but like on the show moving forward, maybe on our next episode to bring in a couple pictures though. And I don't mean this like calling people amateur growers or anything like that, but I mean like some of these diseases that you really know and you have tested and seen these results in the lab. Like, I think it would be great for some of the home growers that just don't have access to these opportunities right now to like have something to see of like, what does this mean if my plant or, you know.
I would recommend Google hemp pests and diseases.
Hemp has a lot more research.
Hemp pests and diseases is like a kind of pamphlet. I think that was written by some CSU scientists. I think maybe just one. Anyway,
put a lot of love to CSU tonight.
I'm not. Yeah, well, I went there. You know, like
it's a good one.
It was. It's a great ag school. I don't know if they want to be publicly associated with me, so I apologize. But anyhow, they've done a lot of great work. Anyway, you can Google that, and you'll probably find this. Either a PowerPoint about it or a PDF. I think that the CSU website also has a link to an updated pests and diseases kind of menu, now that I think of it. Also, the American Phytopathological Society has a ton of free resources. They have protocols for isolating pathogens in pure culture and doing the other kind of intimidating but relatively easy and straightforward culture work. Caveat though, I do not recommend anyone try to culture pathogens like in their home without appropriate controls or like what they're doing. I mean, or culture anything really, because it can become, you don't know what you're growing a lot of the time, and you can be multiplying things that can hurt you. And so I don't recommend that, but in a professional context, certainly.
We also need to have an episode about that specifically too. Is all the chemicals like that people use together, and like some of these things, like what they're compounding to like actually create, like I don't know, just some of the chemicals that you mentioned earlier. Like I've seen people put stuff in like paint sprayers and like all kinds of things that you just can't be using specific products. You're gonna end up hurting yourself on accident, or your staff, or your consumer,
or having a best case scenario, having to throw away a bunch of sprayers, or you know what I mean. Like that's what I was talking about earlier when I kind of derailed myself, was all these little costs add up, all the costs of making mistakes add up, and so it's a lot easier to plan for things on the front end. Find a group that's maybe done work kind of enumerating the risks that are around cannabis production at scale, because that can actually be a lot cheaper if you do it on the front end than if you just have to keep nickel and diming yourself to death for extra sprays or whatever.
So important. Well, should we call it a night?
I think so.
We did it. I mean,
yay.
To
some degree, we did it.
Yeah, I don't know. For the people that watched tonight, I really appreciate you so much more than you could ever know. I know it's been rough. I know it's like, I just promise you I've got potential. I promise it'll get better.
You do.
No.
I believe in you.
Thank you, Andrew. I feel like I've lost my groove a little bit the last couple weeks. It's been a little... Anyways, we're doing this again.
How J-Lo got her groove back.
We can only cross our fingers.
Damn, that was the most dated reference ever. Holy shit.
That's I like that one. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me tonight.
Thank you for enduring my self.
I think we're going to see you here soon.
Awesome.
Lovely evening, everyone, and thank you.